Hi everyone, thanks for being here. Today we're exploring a topic that runs deep in human history and touches how people think, live, and grow. We're going to follow the story of atheism, how it appeared, why it mattered, and what role it plays in our lives today. From the earliest doubts in ancient lands to the modern voices shaping public life. This is a journey, a long one, so stick with me to the end, and if you're listening, let me know where you are and what time it is there in the comments. It's always eye-opening to see who's tuning in. People often think atheism began recently, but the roots go far back. Around 600 BCE in India, the Carvaka school spoke plainly. No gods, no afterlife, just the world we sense with our bodies. Everything else is wishful thinking. A similar tone can be heard in some early Greek thought. Democritus and Epicurus spoke of atoms moving through empty space. No need for gods to explain natural events. Epicurus said fear of gods was a source of human anxiety. If people could drop that fear, they'd find peace. These ideas didn't spread quietly. They showed up in poems, in debates, even in trials. Lucretius in ancient Rome wrote On the Nature of Things, explaining a God-free universe. That work was lost, then rediscovered in the Renaissance, and it sparked fresh courage to ask questions. In medieval Europe, it was dangerous to question faith. Heresy could cost you your life. Yet doubts persisted, recorded in letters, poems, and whispered in quiet corners. Satire and secret codes kept those thoughts alive. Then came a shift. The world changed. Printing presses multiplied information. Telescopes and microscopes opened up new ways of seeing. Old stories about stars, life, illness began to seem thin, and thinkers responded. Spinoza, exiled from his community, saw God as nature herself, a single substance in everything. He didn't speak of a personal deity. Hume examined miracles and human testimony. He pointed out that natural explanations are more likely, that pushed people to apply logic, not faith. Around then, more voices emerged. Voltaire attacked corruption and brutality tied to religious authority. Diderot built an encyclopedia filled with knowledge focused on usefulness. Paine, in Age of Reason, said faith couldn't be inherited, it had to stand up to scrutiny. Darwin's theory of evolution gave a new framework, life shaped by variation and survival, not divine design. That idea shook traditional views deeply. Urbanization and factory life brought social change. Marx saw religion comforting the poor while discouraging action. Freud viewed religious belief as a projection of human desires. These ideas offered alternatives to religious explanations. Political regimes adopted atheism. The Soviet Union stood by secular power, in some cases through force, but they made society accept life without gods. In democracies, the shift was quieter. Schools taught evolution and critical thinking. Libraries opened ideas up. People could doubt and still live openly in their communities. By mid-20th century, surveys showed rising non-religious identity, especially among younger generations. Science advanced. Space missions, neuroscience, psychology, it all painted a picture of a world where meaning could be found without divine stories. Carl Sagan spoke of wonder grounded in evidence. He showed today's vast cosmos can feel amazing without needing gods. Early 2000s saw a wave of bold secular books. The God Delusion, God is Not Great, End of Faith. They spoke about real harm tied to dogma. They stirred debate. Many found comfort. Online platforms grew. YouTube, Reddit, blogs gave supportive communities. Those once isolated beliefs became part of a shared experience. People found not just ideas, but places to talk, question, and grow. Universities introduced secular ethics. Charities built around human connection. Public figures began to identify openly as non-religious, in some places still sensitive, in others unremarkable. Atheism isn't a single belief. Some people live quietly, others are vocal. Some focus on law and policy, others on science, education, or community. It isn't one thing, it's many ways of finding purpose. In countries, some risk safety to speak out, Others enjoy freedom to question openly. What stays true is that space for doubt continues to grow, built from quiet moments of asking why, seen in classrooms, homes, coffee shops, and online spaces. If someone asks what's next, the answer varies. Science, art, friendship, learning, service. Meaning is built, not dictated. Atheism is the story of human thought, daring to question powerful ideas, not to tear down, but to see clearly, to live honestly, to build meaning from real connections. That's the ongoing journey, and the real story continues with each question we ask. During the Enlightenment, Europe became a laboratory for challenging tradition. Religion still shaped most institutions, but new ideas broke through. Newton gave the world laws of motion that didn't need divine tweaking. Locke talked about rights that weren't based on scripture but on being human. The idea that society should be fair, not because of religious orders but because people mattered. That took hold. People started asking harder questions. Why do we believe what we believe? Where does authority come from? If someone says they speak for God, what proof do they have? And if different religions contradict each other, who decides which one is right? These questions didn't always lead to atheism, but they made belief less automatic. The power of religion wasn't destroyed overnight, but it was chipped at from many directions. Art and literature also played a role. Writers like Goethe and Shelley blended science and emotion, showing that life could be rich without religion. They weren't attacking belief directly, they were just painting a wider view of human experience. Atheism didn't grow just through facts, it grew through feeling, through new stories people told about themselves and the world around them. In France, during the Revolution, churches were seen as symbols of tyranny. Some radicals pushed for de-Christianization, replacing religious festivals with ones honoring reason. These moments were extreme and not always successful, but they showed how political and religious authority could be questioned together. The connection between belief and power became clearer. As the 19th century unfolded, public schools began replacing religious education in some countries. Students were taught science, history, literature, subjects where evidence mattered. This shift didn't just change what people knew, it changed how they thought. They learned to ask for reasons, to compare views, to look for patterns. Belief became one option among many. Philosophers kept pushing the boundaries. Auguste Comte proposed a religion of humanity, built on scientific understanding and moral progress, not faith. He believed society could grow through reason alone. Others, like John Stuart Mill, focused on liberty and the importance of thought without restriction. These thinkers didn't call themselves atheists in loud terms, but their work eroded the need for supernatural explanations. In the second half of the 1800s, more people became aware of Charles Darwin's ideas. His theory of evolution suggested that species developed over time through natural processes, not divine creation. For those who already had doubts, Darwin gave them a framework. No gods were needed to explain the variety and beauty of life. That made many religious leaders uncomfortable, and some tried to fight back. But science didn't stop. More discoveries came: electricity, magnetism, germ theory, geology. Each one replaced another layer of superstition with facts. Earth was far older than religious texts claimed. Diseases weren't punishments, they had causes and treatments. Thunder wasn't the voice of a god, it was just sound from energy and heat. Bit by bit, the unknown shrank, and the space for divine intervention shrank with it. At the same time, more people started organizing around secular values. Groups formed to promote reason, free speech, and education. They didn't just want to reject religion, they wanted to offer better systems. Systems based on fairness, discussion, and shared humanity. They built schools, gave lectures, created publications. Slowly, a culture of thinking without gods started to take root. It didn't happen everywhere. In many places, religion still held deep control, but the pressure to conform began to ease. People who doubted no longer had to stay silent. They could speak, write, and meet others who thought like them. And as that space grew, so did the idea that life without religion could be full, not empty. By the start of the 20th century, more writers, scientists, and artists were questioning the place of religion in modern life. Some did it directly, others more subtly. Bertrand Russell wrote essays explaining why he was not a Christian. He didn't just challenge the existence of God, he examined the logic behind religious morality, showing that values could stand on their own. His clear, careful thinking gave others the courage to speak up. As the century moved forward, wars and revolutions tested people's faith in institutions, including religion. The horrors of World War I and World War II left many asking how a good and powerful deity could allow such suffering. Some turned back to belief for comfort. Others saw these events as evidence that humanity had to solve its problems on its own. Atheist and secular voices started to sound more urgent, not out of arrogance, but from concern for the future. In the Soviet Union and later Communist China, religion was restricted. Atheism became part of official policy. That didn't always come from careful reasoning, it was often a tool of control. And while it gave atheism a louder presence, it also caused confusion. People began to associate disbelief with oppression. But in free societies, atheism continued to grow through education, freedom of speech, and open debate. Science advanced quickly. Radio waves, quantum theory, psychology, anthropology, each discovery gave new ways to understand the world and human behavior. Old religious explanations seemed less necessary, and when researchers studied religion itself, they found social patterns, not divine fingerprints. Belief looked more like a product of culture, history, and psychology than universal truth. In the second half of the 20th century, secular humanism gained strength. It offered ethics without doctrine. Instead of commandments, it proposed values like honesty, empathy, justice, and freedom. These weren't handed down, they were worked out through reason and experience. Humanists created documents, conferences, and networks to spread their ideas. They weren't preaching, they were building something grounded in the world we know. During this period, a wider public conversation began. In courtrooms, schools, and newspapers, people debated whether belief should shape public life. Some wanted religious symbols in government, prayer in classrooms, and moral lessons based on faith. Others pushed back. They argued that society should serve everyone, not just believers. That led to legal battles and public campaigns that brought the issue into daily life. Books became key tools. Authors like Isaac Asimov and Carl Sagan wrote about science and wonder without relying on supernatural ideas. Their language was simple, but their messages were deep. They didn't mock religion, they just showed that the natural world, when understood clearly, could be just as inspiring. Sagan's voice reached millions. His words about stars, time, and the smallness of Earth gave comfort through clarity. Atheism wasn't about anger or rejection. For many, it became a quiet decision to trust what could be known, tested, and shared. That trust didn't kill hope or beauty, it gave people a different way to connect. With nature, with each other, with ideas. And those connections didn't need promises of heaven. They just needed attention, curiosity, and kindness. By the 1990, surveys showed a shift. In some Western countries, people who identified as non-religious became a growing minority. In places like Sweden, Norway, the UK, and Japan, organized religion lost much of its influence. The reasons varied. In some cases, scandals damaged religious authority. In others, better education or stronger economies gave people the space to step back from belief. Religion often thrives in crisis. In comfort, it can fade. Then the internet changed everything. People who had always felt alone in their doubts found each other. quiet questions became global conversations. Videos, podcasts, and forums spread ideas faster than ever before. What used to be private thoughts turned into public dialogue. Doubt became part of culture. In the early 2000s, a new wave of authors gave atheism a louder voice. Writers like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Daniel Dennett published books that reached large audiences. They didn't just explain why belief was unnecessary, they argued that it could be harmful. Religion, they said, wasn't just mistaken, it often held back science, encouraged guilt, divided people, and excused violence. These books caused a stir. Some readers were energized, others were offended, but the discussion grew. The word atheist became more visible in bookstores, talk shows, and online platforms. What had once been whispered became open. Some embraced the label, others preferred terms like humanist, skeptic, or secular. But all of them shared a common theme. Life didn't need gods to be meaningful. This new openness also came with challenges. In many parts of the world, saying you don't believe can still cause conflict. Families, communities, and governments may respond with judgment or punishment. That's why some people stay silent, others speak more carefully. But even in silence, many choose to live by reason, honesty, and compassion. And in the long run, that quiet example spreads just as powerfully as any loud debate. New organizations formed to support people without religion. They held events, produced media, and provided resources for those feeling isolated. They also worked to defend the rights of non-believers, especially where laws still favored faith. These groups didn't ask for special treatment, they just asked for equal space, to think, to speak, to live without belief. In schools, some teachers introduced critical thinking earlier. They taught students how to ask questions, check sources, and look at evidence. These skills didn't push atheism, they built the foundation for thoughtful living. And when people learn to think clearly, they often begin to ask deeper questions about belief, tradition, and authority. As this cultural shift continued, television, movies, and music began reflecting a world where belief was no longer assumed. Characters in popular shows expressed doubt or non-belief without ridicule. Songs and stories explored meaning and purpose without reaching for religious answers. The arts helped normalize secular thinking not through confrontation but through reflection and story. In the workplace and in politics, conversations about belief also changed. Some leaders began openly identifying as non-religious, even if they didn't use the word atheist. In business, diversity policies expanded to include those with no religion. What mattered more was respect, not shared belief. This change was slow, and it met resistance, but over time it reshaped how society understood identity. As climate change, inequality, and global health challenges emerged, many people turned not to prayer but to science and action. The idea that humanity must solve its problems using knowledge and cooperation gained traction. That didn't mean rejecting all spiritual practices, but it did shift attention from divine solutions to human ones. Even funerals and weddings started to reflect this new way of thinking. Secular ceremonies became more common. They focused on memory, love, and hope, not on eternity or salvation. People began celebrating life in the present moment. These changes showed how deeply secular ideas had spread, not just in ideas but in everyday rituals. Surveys in recent years have shown that in many countries, especially among younger people, belief in gods is falling. The reasons vary: education, access to information, growing mistrust of institutions, or simply the freedom to reflect. But the pattern is clear. A growing number of people are living without religion. Not in despair, but with purpose, built from their own choices. Today, atheism isn't a movement with a single voice. It's a broad space where people approach life with different tools: science, philosophy, art, or just personal experience. Some advocate for change in public policy. Others focus on building communities that offer the social connection once found in churches. There are gatherings, podcasts, online spaces, and real-life meetups where people share not just ideas but support. There are still countries where atheism is criminalized. In places like Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and parts of Africa or Southeast Asia, rejecting belief can lead to jail time or worse. Even in democratic nations, public figures who identify as atheists can face mistrust. This shows that while non-belief is growing, there's still a long way to go in making that choice truly free everywhere. Yet the trend is strong. In the United States, surveys from Pew and Gallup show that the religiously unaffiliated, often called nones, have grown rapidly. Nearly 30% of adults now say they belong to no religion. In Europe, countries like the Czech Republic, Estonia, and the Netherlands show even higher percentages. Japan and South Korea also show similar trends. These aren't temporary drops. They reflect long-term shifts in how people think about belief. The internet has helped shape this evolution. People can access philosophy, science, history, and personal stories in seconds. A teenager in a small town with religious pressure can read about atheism from someone halfway around the world. That access breaks isolation. And once someone realizes others feel the same, doubt becomes less scary and more natural. Still, atheism doesn't offer a fixed worldview. It doesn't have sacred texts or central leaders. That can be a strength. It allows flexibility, growth, and personal exploration. But it also means atheism doesn't come with built-in answers. People have to build their values and meaning from scratch. For some, that feels like freedom. For others, it feels like responsibility. In recent years, many people who leave religion don't adopt the label atheist right away. They might say they're spiritual but not religious, or agnostic, or just unsure. Some reject labels altogether. What matters more is how they live. They build their lives around what can be known, what can be improved, and what connects people in honest ways. Labels shift, but the way of thinking stays. Younger generations especially show this pattern. Studies in the US and UK find that Gen Z and millennials are less likely to pray, attend services, or believe in a personal God. Yet they often care deeply about justice, mental health, the environment, and compassion. Their values haven't disappeared. They've moved away from dogma and toward shared responsibility. Public debates about belief still happen. Politicians use religious language. Schools sometimes struggle with science curricula. Some communities push to mix religion with law. But now, more people are willing to question these moves out loud. They don't assume religion has a special right to shape the rules. And that shift, quiet but steady, reshapes society from the ground up. One example is the growing number of secular chaplains. These are people trained to help others through grief, crisis, or meaning-making, without using prayer or religious texts. They work in hospitals, the military, universities. Their presence shows that people can care deeply for others and help them through life's hardest moments without invoking the supernatural. Atheism today is less about tearing anything down. It's more about building something real, a world where truth matters, where kindness doesn't depend on reward, where questions are welcomed, not feared, and where people shape their lives based on what they observe, feel, and understand, not what they're told to believe. Technology has become part of the story too. Artificial intelligence, genetic research, space exploration. These fields stretch the imagination but are grounded in what can be tested and observed. They offer answers to big questions, not through belief but through process. And when people see that these tools actually improve life, extend it, protect it, expand it, it becomes harder to rely on ancient texts for guidance. Social media also plays a role. It allows for rapid exchange of ideas, challenges assumptions, and reveals how widespread doubt really is. When someone posts a question about faith, thousands might respond with stories, science, or support. The effect isn't always organized, but it is powerful. Doubt becomes visible, shared, and sometimes celebrated. Still, religion hasn't vanished. In some places, it has grown more intense. People react to change in different ways. Some move toward openness, others hold tighter to tradition. Atheism's rise doesn't mean belief is dying. It means belief is being questioned more often by more people in more public ways. In this shifting world, the role of ethics becomes even more important. Without commandments or sacred laws, people must decide what's right based on reason, empathy, and experience. That can be harder, but it's also more personal, more thoughtful. Ethics that grow from understanding are often deeper than rules followed out of fear. As we look forward, the path of atheism continues to unfold. It's shaped by culture, education, technology, and freedom. It doesn't promise answers, but it invites people to search honestly, and that search, grounded in what we can see and test, remains one of the most human things we can do. In many ways, the growth of atheism reflects the broad human desire to understand the world through curiosity and evidence. From early civilizations to modern science, people have always sought patterns. Why the stars move, why illness comes, why life ends. Religion gave early answers when tools were limited, but now people are finding that many of those mysteries have natural explanations. The journey from myth to method isn't just about replacing gods with equations, it's about valuing doubt as a doorway, not a danger. Doubt allows us to test what we're told, to search for what's real, and to learn without fear. Education plays a critical role in this journey. When children are taught to ask why instead of what, when they are encouraged to think critically and explore multiple viewpoints, they are more likely to develop a worldview based on understanding rather than obedience. In places where education is broad, free, and secular, the rise of atheism tends to follow. This doesn't mean that schools teach atheism. What they do is create space for honest inquiry, and that inquiry often leads people to question inherited beliefs. It's not rebellion, it's reflection, and that reflection opens the door to new ways of thinking. The relationship between science and atheism isn't always about proving God doesn't exist. It's more often about showing that we don't need a God to explain what we see. From the formation of galaxies to the structure of DNA, natural processes unfold with consistency. They don't rely on will or intention. They can be studied, repeated, and used to predict future outcomes. And when someone spends years immersed in that kind of knowledge, belief in the supernatural often fades, not because they're angry or cold, but because they've replaced mystery with clarity. This kind of shift doesn't always happen quickly. Many people go through a long, quiet transition. It might begin with questions about suffering, about justice, about contradictions in sacred texts. Then comes exposure to new ideas through books, conversations, travel, or art. Over time, belief feels less like truth and more like tradition. Some people feel fear at this stage, others feel relief, but nearly all feel the weight of the change. In these moments, people often seek out others who understand. That's where atheist communities, online groups, or secular organizations play a role. They don't provide new dogmas, they offer conversation, encouragement, and perspective. They remind people that rejecting religion doesn't mean rejecting meaning. It simply means building that meaning with eyes open, hands steady, and mind awake. Throughout history, many who questioned religion kept their doubts to themselves. In some eras, even whispering disbelief could cost someone their home, their job, or their life. That silence shaped atheism into something cautious, private, and personal. But now, in much of the world, people can speak openly. And when one person shares their journey away from belief, it gives others permission to do the same. These stories form a quiet network, one that grows not by force but by trust. The importance of personal narrative can't be overstated. A scientific argument might explain why the universe doesn't require a creator. A philosophical essay might explore the flaws in religious logic. But a story? about a person who once believed and now doesn't. Connects in a different way. It shows that disbelief doesn't make someone less human, it makes them someone who thinks, who feels, who cares. And those stories, told through books, videos, or conversations, continue to shift the cultural norm. In some ways, atheism now plays a similar social role to what religion once did. Not in rituals or in authority, but in community and clarity. Many secular people gather around shared values: truthfulness, compassion, justice, equality. They form support groups, charitable efforts, even ceremonies that mark life's changes. These aren't copies of religious habits. They are responses to human needs. People still grieve, still hope, still celebrate. They just do it without invoking the divine. As global communication expands, so does the visibility of atheist thinkers and activists from places where belief is still the law. Brave individuals in Iran, Bangladesh, Egypt, and beyond risk everything just to express their doubts. Some are attacked, some are jailed, some are killed. But even in these places, change begins. The internet allows voices to cross borders. Ideas travel even when bodies cannot. And every act of honesty, no matter how small, helps create space for someone else to question quietly. Atheism isn't a single movement or philosophy. It doesn't have saints or saviors. But it does have a long, growing record of people choosing reason over rules, inquiry over inheritance, and courage over conformity. This history is still being written, not just by famous writers or speakers, but by everyday people who live without belief and show that it's possible to do so with dignity and depth. One of the most powerful changes brought by the rise of atheism is a shift in how people talk about death. In the past, religion often provided the script: heaven, judgment, eternal life. But when belief fades, those promises fade too. That doesn't mean people stop caring about death. It means they begin to look at it differently. Instead of seeing it as a doorway to another world, they see it as part of this final, yes, but not meaningless. Grief becomes more honest, love becomes more urgent, life becomes more precious because nothing lasts forever. This view can lead to a deep appreciation for the present. When people stop looking for another life, they pay closer attention to this one. A walk, a hug, a quiet evening, all of it matters more when it isn't seen as a temporary stop. That awareness doesn't lead to despair, it leads to presence. It teaches people to be here now, not waiting for something greater, and yet meaning doesn't disappear. In fact, for many, it becomes clearer. Without divine rules or promised rewards, people are left to ask, what really matters? For some, it's family. For others, it's creativity, service, curiosity, or truth. These answers differ, but the process of asking them is powerful. It shows that meaning is something we make, not something we inherit, and in that creation there is strength. Even in places where atheism isn't widely accepted, this way of thinking spreads slowly. A teacher asks students to think critically. A doctor relies on science, not prayer. A parent chooses honesty over tradition. These small choices ripple outward. They don't need slogans or leaders. They just need patience and consistency. And over time, they change how communities understand the world. Atheism may never become a majority in every place, but its presence, its influence, and its growth show that it is not a fringe idea. It's a serious, thoughtful, and deeply human way to live. It reflects the best of what people can do: ask questions, face reality, care for others, and find joy not in what might come next, but in what exists now. One of the quiet strengths of atheism is that it allows for disagreement without division. There's no central book that must be interpreted, no authority who decides who's right. People are free to explore different ideas, challenge each other, and even change their minds. That kind of intellectual freedom is rare in rigid belief systems. It creates a space where conversation is honest because it doesn't have to defend the sacred. This openness also invites complexity. Atheists don't have to agree on politics, art, philosophy, or values. What unites them isn't a set of conclusions, but a shared method, looking at the world through evidence, logic, and lived experience. That method allows for growth. It doesn't fear uncertainty. It accepts that not knowing is part of being human. In some ways, this way of living mirrors what science does, not in the tools, but in the mindset. Test what you believe. Be willing to change. Respect what can be shown, not just what is said. And stay humble, because knowledge is always expanding. This humility doesn't mean weakness. It means strength rooted in honesty. It means saying, "I don't know," instead of pretending certainty. Across cultures, this kind of thinking shows up in different forms. In Buddhist traditions, in philosophical skepticism, in naturalism and humanism. These paths aren't identical to atheism, but they share an openness to questioning and a grounding in human experience. They show that disbelief doesn't mean emptiness. It can mean depth, awareness, and care. As more people adopt this way of seeing the world, new tools are needed. Books, yes, but also podcasts, films, art, and social support. It's not enough to reject old myths. People need ways to build new meaning. They need resources to help them face pain, wonder, and change without leaning on the supernatural. These tools are growing, and the people creating them are shaping the future of secular life in real time. The growth of atheism also opens space for deeper ethical thinking. When rules are not handed down by a god, they must be built from experience, empathy, and dialogue. This doesn't make ethics weaker, it makes them stronger. Morality based on understanding can adapt to context. It can change when people learn more. It can include voices that religion sometimes ignores: women, minorities, nonconformists, and those outside traditional norms. One clear example is how secular ethics have shaped modern human rights. Ideas like freedom of speech, gender equality, and LGBTQ+ rights often developed alongside or in tension with religious authority. Where belief systems drew boundaries, secular ethics asked what harm was being done. Where dogma said no, reason asked why, and in many cases that question led to progress. Not because atheists had all the answers, but because they asked better questions. These kinds of shifts don't just affect individuals. They influence policy, law, and education. In countries with strong secular values, policies tend to focus more on public health, science-based education, and individual freedom. Religious beliefs are respected, but they aren't given special power in shaping laws. That separation doesn't threaten belief. It protects it by making it voluntary, not enforced. But these gains can be fragile. In many places, religious movements still push to blend belief with state power. They frame secularism as a threat instead of a framework for fairness. In response, atheists and secular thinkers often work to defend the principle that government should stay neutral, not anti-religious, but non-religious. That balance is essential if diverse societies are to stay free. Atheism isn't about replacing religion with another rigid system. It's about allowing each person the space to think, choose, and live without being told what to believe. That space allows for honesty, it invites responsibility, and it challenges people to find meaning that can survive without myth. As this history reaches the present, it becomes clear that atheism is not just a conclusion. It's a process, a way of thinking that grows out of doubt, observation, and care. It evolves as people evolve. It changes with new evidence, new stories, and new challenges. And unlike systems built on absolute certainty, it doesn't ask for blind trust. It asks for reflection. In many ways, atheism has helped shift the conversation from authority to inquiry. It has pushed people to stop asking what they must believe and start asking what they can know. It has made space for complexity, for silence, for ideas that don't fit neatly into old categories. And through that, it has given millions a way to live that feels honest and awake. This doesn't mean the world has left religion behind. Many still believe, and many still find comfort in faith. But the presence of atheism means those beliefs are no longer the only choice. People can explore, disagree, and walk away without shame. That choice, that freedom, is one of the most important ideas in any open society. The history of atheism is filled with thinkers, writers, activists, and ordinary people who simply chose to see the world as it is. Some paid a high price. Others changed the conversation. All of them added something to the story. A story that continues not just in books or debates, but in daily lives, quietly shaped by reason and compassion. As this story continues, its strength will come not from converting others, but from living clearly, from asking honest questions, from building meaning that lasts, and from showing that a life without belief can be full of thought, care, and depth. Atheism has always been more than disbelief. It has been a commitment to truth wherever it leads.